Welcome back to a video of running on Intel Arc GPU. Today we're going to check out on Diablo 4 with all the Arc GPU. A310, A380, A580, A750 and A770. Welcome to Respawn PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. Now the quick disclaimer, I was playing on a fresh Windows install with all the driver and the Windows update done. No junkware, no malware or pre-installed whatever people put on their computer. So my initial setup is my usual i3-12100F with 16GB of memory. And obviously we start with the bottom card, which is the A310, a 4GB GPU, which is way higher than the minimum requirement, which is the GTX 660. We're going to start obviously at 1080p and have a FPS target of 30 for this kind of game. But since this card is way higher than the GTX 660, I'm going to start at ultra setting. And obviously after you let all the asset and shaders loading, the starter go away and the game comes smooth, we have an average of 34 FPS. This is highly playable for a super budget card. CPU obviously is doing almost nothing, 13%, 19%, and for the memory we have 13.4 system memory of usage. And even though this is the bottom feeder card of the Arc lineup, you should be able to ray tracing, and since the GPU requirement is so low, I'm able to do medium settings, medium ray tracing with this card. Is that crazy? The most budget card you can do ray tracing, and we still have a playable FPS. We're averaging 32 FPS. That's what you can call maximizing the number of players that can play your game, so you're maximizing yourself also. I went a little bit greedy. I try ray tracing high with the A310, which is not really a good idea. We are averaging 22 FPS. It's stuttering like hell. It's a really bad idea. So if you want ray tracing, absolutely medium or low, or not at all. I mean, it's not really good that it can ray trace at all. And still with the A310, because this card can play Diablo 4 so good apparently. So now we jump to 1440p medium settings. The card can definitely handle it. But, there's a big but, we're averaging 30 FPS when there's not too much enemy to kills. Because every time you get a small bunch of them around you, your average FPS drop to the 26 to 28 FPS. Otherwise, if you just want to wander around, you'll get your 30 FPS over. And with another clip of the A310, because I know everyone loved that card, I remember Diablo 4 support XeSS, the scaling from Intel. So I pushed the settings to high at 1440p with XeSS enabled. We get an average of 35 FPS, and when you have a good quantity of enemy around you, you drop to the 30 FPS. So 1440p high settings XeSS, you can play with the A310. Do you believe that? And since we're going crazy with the A310 settings, why not ray tracing enable at 1440p low settings? Obviously, but with XeSS, we get an average of 37 FPS. So if this is the only game you're playing, this is the perfect budget card for high quality visual, I guess. That is if you prefer visual quality over FPS. If you want FPS or if you want both, I don't think this will be an option. But I'm quite surprised with the performance that the little card can offer. Doesn't even require external power. And we're finally jumping GPU, the A380 now. Let's put the A310 aside for a while, let it cool down because it was quite hot. A small 2 fan on it is cooling as best as it can, I guess. So jumping to the A380, which have a 6GB of VRAM instead of 4, we're going to continue where we left with the A310, and we are at 1440p. We're playing with the settings at high, and we get an average of 32 FPS. This is quite good, but when you reach an area with a lot of mob, a lot of enemy, you drop in the 28, 29 FPS. Keep that in mind. But now if you downgrade to medium settings with ray tracing, from high settings, no ray tracing, we lose 1 FPS. So we had 32 FPS for medium ray tracing compared to high without ray tracing. Still highly playable, but watch out again, when you reach a certain amount of enemy on your screen, you drop in the high 20s. This is highly playable, and we are at 1440p. This is insane. This small budget card with ray tracing, and just to show you, with the same setting, medium settings are ray tracing, but with XeSS enabled, we pass from 32 FPS to 40 FPS. This is highly playable with quite high visual quality, with a decent amount of FPS. The high is 48 and the low is 34. That's it for the A380. Now let's jump to the A580. This is a card with 8GB of VRAM instead of 6 and a better clock. And it shows, because the A380 at high settings we were averaging 32, 33 FPS. Now the 580 at high settings, 1440p, we're averaging 62, 61 FPS. That is really nice performance per dollar if you're going to play only Diablo 4. A sub 160, 170 USD, and you can play at 1440p high settings, and we can definitely push the card even harder harder than that, like let's say medium ray tracing, the card still managed to almost 60 FPS. We are at 56. This is highly playable to have a ray tracing game at 1450p, but I'm pretty sure we can push that card even further, because there's still ultra settings and XeSS to try out. So changing to ray tracing high, we get quite a drop in FPS. We're now averaging 49 and often going down to the low 40s, because in my opinion this kind of game can be played at 30 FPS without any issue. All those results is quite fantastic. All those low budget card can get brand new, get ray tracing and easy upscaling to play high resolution and good visual quality. I raise my hat. Even when I'm trying to push the limit of the A580, we now at the ultra settings with ray tracing enabled. We're still getting over 30 FPS. We are at the 31, 32 FPS, and that is at a highly stable, smooth gameplay. This card is better in so many ways, as long as it's a game that is supported by Intel, or there was a driver update including that game, or the developer include the Intel GPU, because ultra settings with ray tracing and we get this FPS, and didn't even enable XeSS yet. Because when you enable XeSS at ultra settings with ray tracing enable, we get an uplift in FPS. We're now at 49 FPS average from 31. This is a huge uplift, but one thing to say, when you max out all the settings for that card, it starts to be a bit more not unstable, but the smoothness is losing a little bit here. The high and the lows are getting a bit crazy. Anyway, it's not like you're going to buy a 580 with a 1440p monitor and play at the ultra settings, ray tracing and XeSS. At least I hope not. Now the juicy GPU, the A750 Elden Ring edition, which is a little bit overclocked compared to the original one. At 1440p ultra settings, ray tracing enabled, we averaging 36 FPS. And for some reason, it took a really long time to have all the shaders, texture, whatever load on the system for it to have a smooth gameplay. And there isn't a much big difference in FPS gain compared to the A580. So for this game, if this is the only game you want to play, the A580 is a better bet than the A750. At least it's cheaper. And enabling XeSS, there's an uplift exactly the same as the A580, and we reached the exact same FPS average, 49. What a surprise. So now with that result, it's even less worth it to get the A750 if you can just play Diablo 4. The A580 for cheaper give the same result in FPS. Jumping into the last card, the A770 LE. This card has 16GB of VRAM compared to the 750 with 8GB, but my 750 has 100 MHz more higher base clock. The thing surprising here is I was averaging 30 FPS after about 20 minutes of gameplay, and it was still stuttery. And out of the 16GB of memory, I'm using 20.3, so I'm using some share system memory to be able to play the game. I think there's some memory leak somewhere making the game extremely stuttery. It's not playable. Even if it's 30 FPS, the smoothness is not there at all. Good thing I have 32GB of memory on my system, because I'm using 26.3. That's quite heavy for a Diablo game. And keeping the same setting but enabling XeSS, we get a little bit better FPS, now 36 FPS, but compared to the A750, which we were at 49 FPS, there's something wrong either on the Intel side or Blizzard side with a card of a 16GB on Intel, because again we have some memory leak or something like that, because we're using 20 plus GB of VRAM, so we're using the system memory as a VRAM for the card, making the game stuttery. It's less than it was without the XeSS, but the stuttering is still there, and it's noticeable, and it's not enjoyable either. There's really something wrong with the 770 and Diablo. I don't know which side it is. My guess is probably a Blizzard issue, not the Intel, but who knows. Thanks for come watching, and see you on the next one. And subscribe.